I thought I was about to watch the person I loved get buried by a lie. Not because the evidence wasn't strong. It was. The footage looked damning, the rumors were loud, and even my best friend had already sentenced him in her mind. But the real horror that day wasn't in the courthouse, or the charges, or the headlines waiting to be written. The real horror was realizing how close I came to abandoning him right when he needed me most, and how the man everyone was ready to call a criminal was actually the one risking everything to take real monsters down. Welcome back to Plot Twist Revolutions, where the villains aren't always who they seem, and sometimes the only person standing between truth and destruction is the one everyone's already decided to hate. Tonight, you're not just hearing a story. You're stepping into a courthouse hallway where loyalty fractures, trust burns, and one message changes everything. My name is Nicole, and this is how I almost let the system, my fear, and my own best friend convince me to betray someone who was never the enemy. They say courthouses smell like paper and old coffee. That day it smelled like fear. The air in that hallway was thick and stale, as if every whispered secret, every plea, every broken promise had soaked into the walls and never left. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright and too cold, turning everyone's face a sickly shade of pale. Shoes clicked against the polished floor in a jagged rhythm. Lawyers in sharp suits, family members clinging to hope, strangers shuffling past with downcast eyes. And there I was, pressed against a wall that felt colder than stone, my fingers tapping out a frantic, uneven beat I couldn't stop. My name is Nicole Davis. And that hallway felt like the waiting room for a life I didn't want. I stared at the double doors, where they'd eventually decide his fate. Mark's fate. The person who made me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. The person who stayed on the phone with me the night my grandmother died, just listening to me breathe. The man I knew down to his smallest habits. And yet, right now, all anyone seemed to care about was a few seconds of grainy surveillance footage. Footage that made him look like exactly what they were calling him. A criminal. A danger. A man who'd gone too far. Nicole. Her voice cut through the static in my head before I even saw her. Amber's heels hit the floor like punctuation marks, each step sharp, confident, impatient. She looked like she always did, put together, controlled, the kind of woman who seemed born for crisis. Only her eyes betrayed her. They were moving too fast, scanning, calculating, searching for answers that didn't exist yet. "Have you heard anything?" she asked. Her words were casual, but her tone wasn't. It was tight, coiled, like she was bracing herself for impact. "No, not yet," I said, rubbing the back of my neck as if I could massage the dread away. "I just can't believe they're actually considering charges against Mark." Amber grimaced and shoved her hands into her pockets, like even having them out made her feel too exposed. "I mean, the evidence looks pretty bad," she said. "The surveillance footage, it's damning." There it was. That word again. Damning. I'd watched that footage so many times it played in my dreams. Mark in a parking lot late at night. Mark talking to men whose faces were all hard edges and shadows. An exchange. A bag. A handshake. Freeze frame. Zoom. Headlines. But I also remembered the way he held kids' hands at the community center, the way he'd stay late helping them with homework, the way their faces lit up when he walked through the door, the way he'd come home with bruised knuckles and a sheepish grin, saying he ran into some trouble taking a shortcut, never wanting to explain, never wanting to worry me. The footage showed one truth. It just wasn't the only one. "It doesn't show the whole picture," I said, too fast, too loud. A couple of people down the hall glanced over. I didn't care. "You know him, Amber. He wouldn't harm anyone." Amber's gaze hardened. She tilted her head, studying me like I was the one on trial. Do I? She asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, he's not exactly innocent, Nicole. We both know he's been involved with some shady people. A knot pulled tighter in my stomach, like someone wrapping rope around it and yanking. Shady doesn't equal guilty, I snapped. You can't throw everything he's done into one basket. Look, I'm not saying he's a monster, but you're treating him like one. The words left my mouth before I could filter them. They hit the air between us like a slap. Amber flinched, not physically, but in that tiny way her mouth twitched, the way her eyes flickered for a split second, hurt burning through her composure. You don't know the whole story, I added softer, but no less firm. She folded her arms, her jaw clenching. You're being naive, Nicole, she said. And it's dangerous. That's rich coming from you, I shot back, mirroring her stance, my own arms crossing defensively. You're acting like a cop. Someone has to. The echo of her words bounced off the marble and windows and ceiling, and for a moment, the hallway went completely quiet around us. It was just her and me, and all the years of friendship between us, suddenly feeling like they were being weighed and measured next to a single question. Did we trust the same person? Or were we now standing on opposite sides of his life? I looked at her, the girl who skipped class with me senior year to drive to the coast, just so we could watch the sun rise over water. The woman who'd held my hair back when I was sick after too many cheap drinks in college. The friend who showed up at my door with takeout the night Mark and I had our first big fight, declaring, "No man is worth cold noodles and tears, but I'll sit here through both." And yet here we were, in a courthouse hallway, her siding with the evidence, me siding with the man behind it. You know, you might be surprised if you actually listen to people, I said, my voice lowering into a plea I hated hearing from myself. There's so much that hasn't come out yet. Amber's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I swallowed hard. I mean, I've seen Mark trying to help the community, I said. He's been working with that after-school program, mentoring kids, keeping them off the streets. You can't just ignore that. Amber rolled her eyes, but there was something else there now. A microsecond of doubt. Mentoring, she said slowly. That's exactly what a villain would do, create a nice facade. My frustration rose like a wave, hot and choking. So you think helping kids makes him suspicious now? I asked. Is that where we are? I think it could be a cover. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping as if the truth itself were dangerous. Look, I get that you care about him, but nothing, I cut in, pushing away from the wall so hard my shoulder ached. I'm tired of you acting like you're the judge and jury here. If you really believe that, then maybe you don't know him at all. Maybe, she said. Just that one word. Sharp. Clean. Deadly. We stood there, our silence louder than the footsteps around us, louder than the rustle of papers and the murmur of lawyers and the distant squeak of doors opening and closing. It was the kind of silence that makes things break inside you. I took a step back, then another. It felt wrong, like I was physically backing away not just from her, but from the years we'd built together. From late-night talks, shared secrets, inside jokes. From everything that had always felt unshakable, until this. I just wish you would trust me, I whispered. It wasn't a challenge. It was a confession. Amber shifted, some of the steel in her face softening. Her shoulders dropped just a fraction. I want to, she said. But. Look, I said, cutting in before she could throw another, but between us like a wall. What if we actually did something, instead of just arguing in a hallway? She blinked. What do you mean? What if we went back, I said, hearing my own voice steady, and looked into the other cases he's supposedly involved in? The people he's met, the places he's been. Maybe there's something we missed. Maybe something connects all of this. Amber hesitated. For the first time since she'd arrived, hope flickered across her face like a match in the dark. "You really think we can find something?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. And I realized I did. I'd rather go down fighting for him than just stand here and assume he's guilty. Her lips pressed together, her mind working behind her eyes, turning over possibilities, risks, outcomes. "Okay," she said finally. "I guess it's worth a shot." The words had barely left her mouth when a loud commotion erupted from the courthouse doors at the far end of the hallway. The double doors swung open and a wave of people spilled out. Reporters jostling for position, camera flashes popping, voices rising into a messy, anxious swell. My heart lurched. I recognized the booming voice at the center of it all. The prosecutor. His cadence was smooth, rehearsed, built to own the room. "We're ready to present the evidence now," he called out. The words rolled through the hallway like a thunderclap. I felt my phone buzz violently in my pocket. For a second, I ignored it. It could have been anyone. A relative. A friend. A spam call that chose the worst possible moment. But something in me said, "Look." My fingers fumbled as I dug it out. The screen lit up with a name that made my chest tighten. Mark. "Nicole, I need to explain. It's not what it looks like." My throat went dry. "He's texting me," I said, the words barely more than breath. "Right now." "What does it say?" Amber leaned closer, her guarded curiosity clawing past her skepticism. I swallowed and kept reading. "He says he was trying to take down a drug ring," I said slowly. "That's why he was meeting those people. That's what the footage caught." Amber's brows shot up. "What?" she asked. "Why didn't he just tell us?" My frustration, my fear, my anger, they all tangled together, coming out as a bitter huff of air. "Maybe he didn't want to drag us into whatever mess he was trying to clean up," I said. "Maybe he thought he could handle it alone, that he could protect everyone and still be the bad guy on camera if it meant getting the job done." Amber's gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted back to me, less certain now. "That actually makes sense," she said quietly. "But why would he put himself in danger like that?" "Because he thinks he can make a difference," I replied. "Because that's who he is." I glanced toward the crowd forming near the doors. "We have to find out what really happened," I added, feeling adrenaline spike through me like electricity. "We can't just sit here and wait to watch them crucify him on half a story." Before Amber could answer, the crowd around the doors parted for a moment, and a figure emerged from the chaos like he'd been pushed out of another world. Mark. He looked wrecked but not broken. His hair was a mess, like he'd run his hands through it 1,000 times. His shirt was wrinkled, collar skewed, tie loose. There was a bruise blooming along his jawline, the sickly purple rising angrily against his skin. But his eyes were sharp, awake, burning. When they found mine, it felt like the hallway disappeared. "Nicole," he called, and his voice cut through the noise with a strange, steady urgency. "Amber." We both froze. People brushed past him, some pausing to stare, others whispering, but he didn't look at them. He was zeroed in on us. On me. On the one person who was supposed to believe him, and had almost failed. He stopped in front of us, close enough that I could see the tremor in his hands, the way his chest rose and fell too fast. "I need you both to trust me just this once," he said. Just this once. Like he knew how far my doubt had stretched. Like he knew how close I'd been to giving up. "I've got evidence that could take down that entire ring," he continued. "But I need help." Something in his tone, calm but fierce, desperate but not begging, slid past my fear and clicked into place with something deeper. Faith. History. Memory. Every late night talk. Every small kindness. Every time he chose to step between someone vulnerable and someone cruel. All those moments rose up at once and stood beside him. "We're in," I said, the words leaving me without hesitation. "Just tell us what to do." Beside me, Amber exhaled slowly. I heard the surrender in it, not to him, not yet, but to the possibility that she'd been wrong. Mark's shoulders dropped in relief. For a second, the mask of control cracked and I saw the exhaustion, the fear, the weight he'd been carrying alone. He turned to Amber. "Can I count on you too?" he asked. Amber held his gaze. The silence stretched into something fragile and real. Finally, she nodded. "Let's figure this out together," she said. "We'll clear your name." The hallway noise swelled back into focus around us. People talking, doors closing, the distant shuffle of papers and footsteps. But in that little circle, me, Amber, Mark, it felt like everything had gone still. The sides had shifted. The lines had redrawn. We weren't prosecutor versus defendant. We weren't skeptic versus believer. We were something else. A team. Built in the middle of a storm. "Together," I echoed, tasting the word on my tongue like a promise I wished I'd made sooner. We didn't walk away from the courthouse that day with a neat resolution, a judge's gavel, a crowd cheering the truth. Real life doesn't work like that. What we walked away with was messier. Phone records to pull. Names Mark whispered to us in low, urgent tones. Addresses of warehouses and back rooms and bars where deals went down. Timelines that didn't match the story the prosecutor wanted to tell. We spent nights hunched over laptops, the blue light carving shadows into our faces. We zoomed in on security footage until the pixels blurred. We traced transactions, cross-checked call logs, compared timestamps. Mark walked us through every meeting, every risk, every covert conversation with people he never wanted us anywhere near. We argued. We cried. We doubted. We kept going. Amber, who'd once stood on the opposite side, became viciously methodical. She picked apart the prosecution's narrative like she was dismantling a bomb. Every assumption, every obvious conclusion, they all went under her microscope. The same intensity she used to push me away from blind belief now turned on the system itself. "You're annoying when you're right," Mark muttered once, after she poked a hole in a key piece of evidence. "You're alive because I'm annoying," she shot back. And under the bite was something like care. Days bled into weeks. The investigation didn't cleanly turn into some dramatic courtroom reveal. Instead, it was a slow, grinding war of attrition, one where Mark's lawyer quietly added new exhibits, where the prosecutor's confidence started to crack, where one of the shady contacts flipped and admitted under oath that Mark wasn't running drugs. He was feeding information. Under pressure, the story, the real one, began to surface. Mark had been meeting known dealers, suppliers, middlemen, but not as a buyer, not as a partner, as a leak, as a problem, as a threat. He'd been passing information to an overworked, underfunded task force that had asked him to stay quiet. "The more people that know, the more risk," they'd said. "We need deniability. We need you to keep your head down." They needed him, and then, when the optics went bad, they were nowhere in sight. "Not everyone with a badge always has your back," Mark had said once, half joking, when I questioned a patrol officer's decision at a charity event. Back then, I'd laughed it off. Now, I heard it for what it was. A warning. The charges didn't vanish in a flash of justice. They eroded. Witness statements shifted. The surveillance footage that looked so damning became just one piece of a much larger pattern. A pattern that, embarrassingly for the prosecution, didn't point to Mark as the kingpin. It pointed to him as a liability. Eventually, the day came when a very tired, very irritated prosecutor stood in front of a judge, and, with all the enthusiasm of someone eating cold broccoli, announced that the state would be reconsidering its position given new information. The charges didn't magically turn into a Medal of Honor. Mark didn't get applause. There were no news crews calling him a hero. But the handcuffs came off. The case was quietly closed. He walked out of that building a free man. And I had to sit with the knowledge that for a terrifying stretch of time, I'd almost believed the worst. The night after it all finally, truly ended, we sat outside on my tiny balcony, the one barely big enough for two folding chairs and a plant that refused to die. The city glowed around us, a softer mirror of the courthouse lights that had felt so harsh. Amber had gone home a few hours earlier, after shoving a bag of takeout into my hands and saying, "If you ever doubt your gut that hard again, I'm filing a complaint with the universe." It was her way of saying she was sorry, and that she was proud. Mark leaned back, his chair creaking. "So," he said, staring out at the skyline, "you almost gave up on me." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement, the kind that pierces anyway. I swallowed. "I almost did," I admitted. For a minute, it felt easier to just go with what everyone was saying, with what the video showed, with what made tidy sense. He huffed a quiet laugh. "Tidy," he repeated. "Nothing about this was tidy." "No," I said. "It wasn't." Silence settled between us, but it was a gentler one this time. Not the heavy courthouse hallway silence. This one felt earned. Like a pause in the middle of a song, not the end. "I'm sorry," I said. He turned to look at me, really look, his eyes soft despite the exhaustion still clinging to him. "For what?" he asked. "For being human." "For doubting you," I said. "For letting the worst-case scenario scream louder in my head than everything I know about you. For letting fear talk louder than history." He was quiet for a moment. "Fear is loud," he said eventually. "It's supposed to be. It keeps you alive until it starts killing things it shouldn't." "Like trust," I whispered. "Yeah," he said. "Like trust." I watched his hands rest on his knees, the faint scars across his knuckles catching the light. Hands that had held frightened kids. Hands that had shaken with adrenaline in parking lots. Hands that had almost been cuffed for good. "You could have told us," I said, not accusing, just reaching for the missing piece. "About the drug ring, about what you were doing." He stared ahead for a long time before answering. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "The less you knew, the less you could get dragged into. The less anyone could use you against me, against what I was trying to do." He shook his head, a bitter shadow of a smile on his lips. "I thought I was being noble," he added. "Turns out, I was just isolating myself and making it easier for everyone to believe the worst." I let that sink in. Silence again. Then softly, "We almost lost you," I said. He looked at me. "And I almost lost you," he replied, "because I didn't trust you with the truth." We sat there, both realizing the same thing in different words. Trust isn't just about believing the best in someone when the world doesn't. It's also about letting them see the parts of your life that could be misunderstood, and trusting them not to walk away. If I had to sum up what that whole nightmare taught me, it wouldn't fit on a verdict form or in a courtroom transcript. It would sound more like this. Not everyone who looks guilty is. Not everyone who looks innocent is, either. Bad people can learn the right lines. They can volunteer, donate, smile for photos, and wear their masks so well that you'd swear they were saints. And good people can look terrible on camera. They can be in the wrong place with the wrong faces. They can say the wrong thing at the wrong time. They can take risks in the dark that look unforgivable in the light. We live in a world that loves snapshots, clips, headlines, 3-second loops on repeat until they rewrite reality. But no single frame holds the whole story. That day in the courthouse hallway, I almost let a single frame erase years of knowing someone's character. I almost traded lived experience for public narrative. I almost walked away from the one person who was, quite literally, putting himself on the line for others. What saved him in the end wasn't the system suddenly waking up and doing the right thing. It was the messy, painful, uncomfortable choice to pause, to ask questions, to dig deeper, to stand beside him, even when it made me look foolish to people who'd already made up their minds. If there's any kind of karma in this story, it's not the poetic kind where villains fall into the pits they dig. It's quieter. It's the way the truth refuses to stay buried forever. The way inconsistencies eventually show. The way conscience gnaws at those who know more than they're saying. The way loyalty, once tested and refined, becomes something harder to break. Mark still carries scars from all of it. So do I. So does Amber. But those scars, they're not just reminders of pain. They're proof that we chose not to be the kind of people who walk away at the first sign of smoke. We chose to step into the fire and find out what was really burning. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. When the world tells you who someone is in a 30-second clip, remember the hours, the days, the years you've actually known them. Remember the quiet moments, the small kindnesses, the consistent choices no camera ever bothered to record. And before you condemn someone you've loved, stood beside, laughed with, trusted, ask yourself, is this really the whole story? Or is it just the part that's easiest to believe? My name is Nicole. I almost let fear make that choice for me. I'm just grateful I listened to something else in the end. Thank you for walking through that hallway with me, for sitting in the silence, for feeling the doubt, the anger, the panic, the relief. If you've ever judged someone too quickly, or been judged off a single moment, a single mistake, a single angle, you're not alone. And if you've ever wondered whether it's worth digging deeper when everyone else is shouting their verdict, it is. Because sometimes the plot twist isn't that the villain was secretly a hero. Sometimes the twist is that you were seconds away from becoming part of the mob that destroyed them. And you chose instead to stand still, to look again, to listen. That choice can save a life. It definitely saved his. And in a way, it saved mine too. If this story hit you in a place you weren't expecting, if it reminded you of someone you misjudged, or someone who never gave up on you, share it in the comments. This channel lives on stories like yours. Twists, reversals, the messy truth under the easy labels. If you want more nights like this one, more stories that start one way and end somewhere you never saw coming, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us here at Plot Twist Revolutions. Because out there, in crowded hallways and quiet rooms and lives that look ordinary from the outside, not every verdict is final. And not every story is what it seems.